nostalgia sits on the fault line between comfort and escape.
The objects create quite visceral memories, more so than, say, photos.
It can remind us of our own resilience. So I think also, unconsciously, it can become rumination, a way of avoiding the present as well.
The key thing is the anchoring bit, because I would say that I have positive and negative memories of the past.
It's about having the opportunity to try and lean on the ones that give us the most joy, the most positivity, the most opportunity to move forward.
Good afternoon, Nick. How are you doing today after it was quite a busy night last night for people in the UK? I didn't stay up to watch it. Did you stay up?
I did. It's no surprise. I'll be honest, I stayed up. The kickoff time for the England v Mexico game, which is what we're referring to, was delayed by an hour.
How was it delayed as well?
So I was like, my sleep's too important. So I did stay up to watch it. And then I was like, I'm not staying up another hour. I went back to sleep and didn't make it. I didn't watch the whole game. I watched a little bit towards the end. I've caught the highlights again today. So not as bad as other people might be today, but I did do my ever best to watch it. And what a game to miss as well. But we're through. So I've got tickets to the final. So the most important thing for me is if we get to the final, I get to see that bit live. That'd be amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I obviously didn't stay up. I'm not really the biggest football fan. However, I got up this morning. I put it on our iPlayer as I was doing my morning mobility work, but I was in a bit of a rush today, so I had to kind of skip through it. And actually, I had an interesting meet this morning. So I met up with someone that I have not seen for 30 years. So recently I was getting in touch with a bunch of people as part of my 100 group challenge. But I don't think I got in contact with this person through that. I think it was a few years ago through Facebook. I think I just messaged her when I was clearing out a bunch of old photos or whatever it was and sent them to her. And she's not really on Facebook, but so she got back to me maybe 2 or 3 years later. And she's like, oh yeah, I kind of live in Enfield. And I was like, oh, I'm in Barnet at the moment. Or this was when I was still in Barnet. And then eventually she responded another 2 years later, whatever it's been. So this message has been going on for a while. And we met up this morning anyway, long story short. So we went to school together. In fact, actually, she wasn't my first, but she was maybe my second girlfriend ever.
Yeah, romance in the air again, maybe?
When we were 12 years old. It was really funny because she and I the way we got together actually was quite interesting because we were on a school trip in Wales in I want to say our first year, but maybe it was our second year. I think it was at the beginning of our second year, so year 8. And I'm not sure why, but she had this idea that she wanted to pretend to be boyfriend and girlfriend, I think because she was getting annoyed with her other friend and to make her jealous or something. There was a bit of a love triangle going on, let's put it that way, at that age. And so we got to pretend to be dating for the week we were away. And then I think on the last night, we ended up, in the bunk beds together, having a bit of a snog and all this. And then I remember having a snog in the minibus on the way back underneath the jackets with other people around sort of thing who were hiding. Kind of dated, I think, for a few weeks, maybe like 6 weeks. And then I think she broke up with me, I think, because she thought I did actually fancy the friend. But anyway, and then we didn't really speak much until probably sixth form. So when we got to year 12 or 13 and I was working in a local Asda near her house, so I would just drop by there on a Sunday evening just to chat. We were only just friends. Nothing's ever happened since we were 12 years old or anything like that, but we reconnected as friends. And then after uni, we wrote each other a couple of letters, but I've never seen her in 30 years. So I haven't seen her at all for 30 years. And it was really kind of cool. So we went for a little bit of a walk, catch up, and she's got a couple of kids. She's got a partner, although I think that may be fizzling out. It was interesting because she always was a little bit more aloof. She didn't seem part of groups there. I think she was more into drama and art, and I think she ended up becoming a dancer, and now she does body therapy, we're using Pilates and Qigong and yoga as a therapeutic tool for people. So that was quite funny. But actually, and she looks like the same, obviously a little bit older, but generally the same, and we we're about halfway into our walk and we were walking in these woods. And then I see this other person come up to me and I'm like, and I called this person's name, and it turned out it was a girl I dated for a few months, 20 odd years ago, is now married to one of my best friend's brothers, which I know about. And, we're still good friends. She came to my dad's funeral, so I saw her at the funeral and things like that. I introduced her to, but what was even funnier than that was that this girl's daughter turns out is in the same class as the other girl's son, and actually her daughter has a bit of a crush on my friend from school's son, and they
Small
had a bit of
world.
a banter. It was just a
And
really
when you
bizarre
meet
morning.
another girl that you met a decade ago, so you can just tick off 30 years, 20 years, 10 years, meet more than one girl. You got a girlfriend in
no,
every
actually, I don't think I want to meet the one from the decade ago, to be fair. But anyway, yeah. So
That's
that was
good,
an
mate. It's
interesting morning.
nice. There's something uniquely nostalgic, I think, around just meeting people or reconnecting with people you haven't seen for a long time. I had that thought stuck to mind when you mentioned it, as you said a word, nothing to do with meeting people years ago, but you mentioned a word that drives my wife nuts. She just does not like it at all. And I've used the word, and that's the word snog. She's like, you can't use that word. It's like the worst word. I use it sometimes.
It is a terrible word.
I know she hates it. Like, come on.
I would never use it now to describe that action.
I still use it.
At the time, that's what you described it, and therefore that's what I referred to. But I was thinking about the meeting this morning, and it was really nice to connect with people from that time. And one of the reasons I think it was nice is because it brings you back to that age of, for me, it's more like 12, even though obviously I saw her at 18, but where, your life felt simpler and you felt safe, and you were, safe with your parents because they, fed you and did everything for you and everything. And it just brought a bit of much needed comfort to my life at the moment. I feel like I've got two things going on, and I just thought, I didn't expect that. I was like, oh, there's that feeling of familiarity, that feeling of like bringing you back to that time.
I had a similar feeling. So I gave a talk on my fear equation, my fear talk, the cost of fear, at a gig at Alton Towers. And at the event, I spoke about my wife. Oh, Lucy. Spoke about Lucy. And in the talk, I talk about the bravest and most courageous person I know. And I talk a little about her story. It's weird. She wasn't in the room, but there were reasons I utilized her. I was speaking to a group of entrepreneurs and franchise owners, and she started a franchise, which is now one of the biggest franchises in the country. So it was a relevant example to use, and I was sort of mirroring and showing awareness for some of the challenges I know they're faced with when you start a franchise, and the challenges that you have, and how she overcame them. It was weird. Like, I didn't realize it would hit me in the way it did, but when I was delivering the talk, it kind of bubbles up inside you, this genuine pride. Like, I was talking about her bravery and her courage, and the difference between bravery and courage, which for those interested, I define personally as bravery being the hero leap, the first leap. Courage is doing the same thing again, knowing the cost of the first one. So if you can do it again and again, it's aligned with your values, that takes courage. But the first time we can jump off an aeroplane, the second time, you know how scary that is. If you do it again, it's not bravery, it's courage, right? You know the cost of the first effort. So I talk a little bit about that on the talk. But as I was talking about her work, it's rare you get a chance to step back and reflect on how proud you are and the journey you've been on, particularly of your partner. Well, I know the journey she's been on. It was so long ago. It was probably the first opportunity in maybe a decade where I had a chance to publicly acknowledge and reflect on just how courageous she was. And I wrote the script and I wrote what I was going to say, and that's fine because it fitted the chat. But actually in the moment, it kind of all bubbled up. And I had no idea it was going to hit me that way. And I felt overwhelmed with pride. Hopefully that came through in the event itself, but a little bit nostalgic pride as well. Like, she's in a different space now. She's doing something else she loves. But when that was our part of our journey, like, I remember the admiration I had and looking at her and being so proud of the steps she took. And sometimes it's easy to forget. You see couples break up and they often forget what brought them together in the first place. That distance hits. And there's obviously many reasons why people split. But it was nice. It kind of reconnected me to some of the things that maybe I'd taken for granted or forgotten in my partner. And she's in New York at the minute, so I haven't even had a chance to see her since I gave the talk. But it was nice to have the feeling anyway, Oh,
that's great. I mean, it's interesting how like the emotion of something can come up unexpectedly. As you were telling that story, it reminded me of just last week. Last Thursday, I went into town on the bike to deliver a very brief workshop for some disadvantaged youths who are part of a corporate reach out scheme. Great stuff. I had a great time, but that's not the story. The story was I was cycling back through, I guess it was in the city. So I was cycling back through a bit of my old stomping ground, and there's so much development that's happening around Liverpool Street, which is where I used to work. I thought, oh, let me go to the old area where I worked. So when I worked at the London Stock Exchange, I worked in their data center. So when I met you, I was still there actually, but I was leaving about a month later.
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah, I was leaving a month later. The London Stock Exchange is by St. Paul's, but the data center is about a mile away. Walk in a little bit grotty bit of East London behind Liverpool Street Station, really. But I was quite shocked because all that was stood there in that building was they kept the front of the building to walls, but it's all a construction site now behind, and they're building something massive because they're digging deep. But as I looked at that and I took a photo, I felt somewhat like cheated in a way. I felt like this is like, I spent 6 years of my life there. 3 of those were doing shift work. So I was working weekends, overnight. I sacrificed social life. It was a pretty tough environment to work in, if I'm honest. And it might have even scarred me to the point, which is why I haven't really come back to corporate probably since then. But I looked at that and I thought, like, that legacy of my time there, is gone. It's disappeared. It's like there's no evidence I ever worked there.
Yeah,
I felt like really weird. I didn't expect to feel that.
I can understand it. The company I left to launch my recruitment business in 2008 doesn't exist anymore. Actually, I had a chance to purchase it for £1. Genuinely, and that was a weird feeling. You kind of always want to do it just for the nostalgia. Then sadly, and it is sad, right? You need competitors in this world to keep yourself on your toes. And I left to do my business as a result, partly of me leaving, doing as well as we have. They struggled and they ended up not making it. And it was like, it's sad. Like the company that set me on my path doesn't exist anymore. It's completely gone. And I generally had an opportunity to purchase it. I didn't because it was in such a bad state. At that point, you've got to put your business hat on over your nostalgic one. It wasn't worth the risk. But yeah, it is weird. It is weird. I'll be forever thankful for the chance it gave me and for the education that I've received along the way. But it is weird to think it doesn't even exist anymore. Like it's just, it's gone.
It's gone. I mean, I kind of, somewhat of a tangent, but somewhat relevant. It made me think, like, if anyone was trying to, in the future, identify or corroborate that I'd worked in that certain place or I'd got a certain degree or whatever, I'm sure they could find ways. But it made me think, these things disappear, the people move on, that, it's quite hard. And it reminded me of the UFO guy, Bob Lazar. You need to check out the documentary that they just made on him. Well, he claims to have worked at Area 51 or an area of Area 51 called S4 back in 1980 something. And he came forward back then after being there for 6 months. And he says he was working on a particular aspect of retrieved, vehicle, right? Basically flying saucer. He's been inside them. He's worked on them. His story has not changed in 40 years. He has not made any money from his story, I don't believe. In fact, it's been detrimental to him. But he had these claims of like he worked at XYZ, Los Alamos this and worked at this. But when people are trying to check, and obviously they can be scrubbed by government people all the time, there's supposedly no evidence, although there are newspaper clippings of him saying that he's done these things. And I was thinking, it's very easy for things to get lost. I think like if I tried to claim now, I know what mark I got in my degree. I've got my degree up over there, but I don't have the piece of paper. I know I got exactly, I think it was 73.9 or 73.7%. So basically 74%. So a first class degree is 70 and above, but they kind of allow plus or minus. But
Does
I
it
know
matter?
those results. I know I've got those results somewhere, but like
Surely do.
how would they corroborate those? It's like,
I guess you'll never need to because you'll go back into that work. There's no element there as well.
But my point is that like how easy is it for your past to be erased in a way? I don't know.
And I get that. I think there's a separate question I'd ask, which is we often need these things to convince others that we're good enough, right? Sometimes people request the information, but there's an idea that we need to constantly show people that we're good enough with justification elsewhere. What I think is sad.
It's more about evidence, not good enough. It's just that to prove that actually I went to that university, I studied there.
Sometimes we put these. I'm as guilty. I've got awards behind me, not there, things like that. These are credentials to show other people I'm good enough, or evidence that I'm good enough. But really, it doesn't really matter what other people think. Nothing means anything but the meaning we give it. Really, what matters is that I know that I'm good enough. But sometimes this stuff can support the story. Maybe we're going too deep into the world of mindfulness here. But what I think is interesting is, an ethos I live by, have always done since we started the tours, which is life is about stories. To prove I'm not making that up. My daughter, I'll only show you the first one because they're all on the wall. But my wife made up some frames. Life, that's the first one. I've got them all up here in a thing. Life is about stories.
Nice.
But the idea being, right, that when you're on your deathbed, that's what you've got. And I think in your instance, or in my instance with my previous employer, when a story, it still exists in our mind, right? You still work there. But when the physical bricks and mortar have disappeared from the story, there's an element that makes it feel like it's vanished. And I think that the example you gave with the UFO is difficult. He's living on a story that he can't really, he knows the story, but part of the beauty of story is the storytelling, is the sharing of stories. Whether you're writing that in cave paintings, 22 or 200,000 years ago, whatever it is, to whether it's now. And if you share a story that you can't evidence, I don't know, it just feels a little more fun.
For his perspective is about that credibility. He's now like can't prove that he is who he says he is and this and the other. I think from our perspective, it's more about certain things create memories. I was having actually quite an interesting conversation on Saturday with a friend of a friend at kind of a summer party or whatever, summer barbecue. And we got into this whole idea. I think he's a bit of a hoarder. We were talking about clutter. We were talking about holding on to things. And, you know, he collects tons of magazines and things like that. But the objects create quite visceral memories, more so than, say, photos. And as you start to, you know, move house, like I was explaining to him, obviously, I've moved a few times in the last few years, but I've got a single box now, quite a big box, but that's where I'm putting my trinkets. For example, I've got like a little, I don't know if you remember those old troll dolls from the
Yeah. How can I forget them with the hair? Trolls, the whole movie, man. Trolls the movie.
Yeah. So I've got one of those that a girlfriend I had when I was maybe like 13. She's Danish, and the Danish guides Danish scouts and guys came over, and we did camps together every couple of years. And I've got that, and I've got something I think that one of the other girls, today's girl's friend, gave me years ago, like a little pot or something, like just little trinkets which just remind me of certain things. And so when you lose those things, or when you somewhat do feel lighter, because I think objects weigh us down a lot. And that's what we were talking about there, where I was talking about how I like quite nice ordered state of affair. And then I find that when I'm at my parent or my mum's house, there's quite a lot of visual noise, which for me doesn't jive. And so it was really about, you know, how your outer world being a reflection of your inner world, essentially, and how, you know, cluttered space outside, cluttered mind inside, and so on. And we were having a little bit of a spiritual debate about how true that was and whatever else.
I think it's a debate I'd enjoy having with you when we next meet. Or maybe just have it on
more clutter clothing.
Yeah, although, I kid you not, it's on my desk, so I'll do a little plug for a company that I've never worked with, but someone's mum gave me this card in a shop. I was in a shop in Exeter, and she went, my daughter's launched a business. I was talking about clutter, and her business is here, free plug, tidykind.co.uk, creating space that works for you. Let go of what no longer serves you. Enjoy a calm and more organised home. Create a space you feel proud to live in. There's the flyer. So I've actually got in touch with them today, because now I could do it myself, but this is stuff been sat on my desk on my to-do list for years. Let's bring in an expert. Let's declutter, because it can weigh you down. But
it does, yeah.
As you said, like, I've got boxes of, it won't surprise you, in the attic of nostalgic things. Funny enough, I kept some certificates today that Leo didn't even care about, the bottom of his school bag. I dragged them out, put them in his little file. My mum's got files for all of us. I think nostalgia sits right on the fault line, right, between comfort and escape. Like, we need it, makes us feel comfortable. And I think done well, like, we can revisit the past, and it can really kind of lift our spirits, like it did with me talking about my partner in the speech. That lifted me, right? And I think that's good. It can remind us of our own resilience, or of our partner's resilience in my case. But I think also, maybe it's a bit like the example you gave earlier, like unconsciously, it can become rumination, you know, like a way of avoiding the present as well. Like, we live in the past. I think it's being able to understand, having the awareness to understand whether, like anything, it's serving us in a positive way, giving us that energy, or whether it's holding us back because we are spending our time in rumination. We are trying to live the days that have now gone. You know, I think about relationships when I was 12, 13 years old, and in my head, they're the best relationships ever, right? And I'd have been a pre-nager, and they were nothing but snogging probably, but you feel like they were brilliant. And then more recent bias you get, the more complicated they become. There's something in the childish nature of the non-worried relationship back in the day. We had no responsibilities, everything was perfect. Of course, it never was. It's just how we like to remember things.
And I think for me, it's a couple of things. One, like revisiting those things, which typically only happens when you move anyway, but I think like they could be quite good anchors, let's say, when you get really old and you need to pull the memories back. Let's say if someone's cognitive abilities are going, sometimes people use things like that so that they can remember. I don't tend to have old things that I can see day to day. Like I said, this box is up in the loft and whatever else. But I do sometimes, and I was talking to this girl about it today, because we were sort of talking a little bit about the past, a little bit about other more interesting things, because she's obviously taken a different path to what a traditional working a 9 to 5 and everything else. And I think she felt a little bit trapped at the moment, because like financially she's not where she wants to be, and she's still living with her partner and whatever. But I think she was, and I actually I quoted you today, because she has kind of detached herself from the school days quite a lot, because it makes her feel anxious and uncomfortable. And, you know, part of that is, you know, you're comparing yourself to where all your other school friends are. And I said the thing that you say all the time, right? Comparison is the thief of joy. And I think about that a lot because, you know, and I mentioned to her, I can't do that. And I talked about an experience a few years ago where I think I went down a rabbit hole, like online, looking at an ex-girlfriend, which actually she follows that particular person. And she's like, oh no, she's crushing it. I'm like, I don't want to know anything, to be honest. I don't want to compare myself to my ex or my ex school friends or whatever, because when I do that, I can always find something that they are.
It steals our happiness.
Yeah, it does. And like I was saying to her, because she was saying, oh, you know, I'm not really on stuff that much. And I see the snippets and I'm like, yeah, but remember, because even when she was like, she knows what's up with my sister. I'm like, but you know, my sister's got her own issues, right? Happening with like trying to find her next work or whatever. Like you only ever see the highlights, right? Is, you know, on these platforms, you don't see many the lowlights, and so you're comparing your worst day to their best day. Of course
you are. Also, we have an inherent negative bias, right, which is not new to most people, I'm sure, listen to this show. You know, you look at things and it highlights your own weaknesses, insecurities, whatever. I mean, interestingly, right, so I gave this talk at Alton Towers. I would argue went really well. All the feedback has been nothing but positive, literally like brilliant, great, all good. I phoned Lucy, or you know, this is how it's gone because she's in New York, and I'll give her, she was up keen for an update. And what I should have done is gone and went, like I said, it went really well. Feedback's been great, really positive. Instead, I gave all the things that I could have done better. Like we have a natural want to take that course of action. A really good example of this, if anyone's listening, and whether you recognize this in yourself or not, certainly something that I've done, or certainly something I've seen my partner do. It's like you buy a new top, right? You're really happy with it. You love it. And let's say it costs £100. It doesn't matter, right? The cost is irrelevant, really. But you love the top and it's by a brand. Let's say, I don't know, Tommy Hilfiger or whatever. And you come up to me, Harry, your friend comes up to me and goes, oh, I really love your top. How often do we hear the person turn around and go, thank you, I really like it too? Usually our natural inherent response is, oh, this old thing, I found it in a sale and I only got it from a charity shop and I wouldn't have bought it if it wasn't 20% off. And we go straight into a justification mindset of like, yeah, it's that comparison piece. You're worried that they're judging you. We're fearful of the judgment. We're fearful of so many things. It's so British
thing. Yeah.
But it comes out.
I remember that being a lesson that I learned in my first NLP course 16 years ago, where that was the exact thing. Because often people, I think part of it is tied to self-esteem. And when you're like, you've got the self-esteem, you've got the confidence to be able to just say thank you, because rather than
I agree,
reflecting or giving them a compliment about something.
You've nailed it. It's absolutely right. I've been working with Lucy to get her to say thank you, and she's getting it now. And
ever since then, I've been predominantly able to just say thank you, right? It's like, you're not saying this to me so that you can fish for a compliment, but we have this need to repay what we feel is a debt that's owed. It's one of those influence things where, you know, the Hari Kalymnios give you a little toy or something and then you feel like you have to give something back, right? So we have this in us because we're kind of giving people. But yeah, it takes a lot of, I guess, self-confidence, self-esteem just to acknowledge that, say thank you. I think I heard one of my favorite podcast hosts, he goes a bit further, where I think if someone gives him a compliment, he might say something like, thank you, that really lands with me, or I really accept that. There's some other words that he uses to like, not just say thank you as a, thank you, let's move on, but just like, you know, that lands with me. I would really appreciate what you said, or some version of that.
The tone needs to be right, otherwise it starts to border on the realm of conceited, right? You want to get it to sound authentic. Yeah. It has to be authentic. But I do think as well, it's the reminder that you don't need someone else's validation to feel good. So it doesn't really matter. So just be appreciative of the comment. You don't need to justify it because your worth comes from inside, right? A question I wanted to ask you, seeing is we were going to talk about something completely different today. We're going to talk about glucose monitoring. We'll come back to that, maybe another show. But I want to go back to you meeting your friend, because I'm interested to know if there was there's something called, I don't know if you've heard of embodied cognition. So I came across this in my fear research. But the idea that your memory is embodied. So your recall is improved when the conditions of retrieval match the conditions of which the memory was formed. So in your example, you meet your friend and suddenly you remember loads of other things that you may have also forgotten, a location, an event, the Welsh trip I think you mentioned. Like that may have been a million miles away. And if I'd asked you to recall it in the moment, you'd have gone, I don't know. But when you're with her, suddenly bush all the neurons are firing.
Interesting that you say that, because I drove to her instead of cycling, and it was quite a tight road. And she said, look, just park in front of the drive, whatever. When I got out of the car and parked, she said something like about, show me those expert parking skills. And then it suddenly reminded me that I think because I used to drive her a couple of times places or whatever, and I had this big Volvo a lot of the time, but I think maybe it was a Citroen sometimes as well. But and this was before parking sensors, before cameras, but I was pretty good at like
proper parallel parking days, right?
Yeah, getting into spots and things. And so I never knew that. It was quite funny that was something that she recalled, like in that moment, about our relationship, that I was good at parking or something like that. So so that one, probably, I get that, because you see things and you remember them because you've got basically the trigger. This is what we're talking about, having the objects though as well, is that when that environment, that will trigger more memories. We actually had our school reunion on the weekend. I don't know anyone that went. She certainly didn't. I went to my school friend's summer party thing because I didn't know anyone else that was going from my year, but it's 30 years since we graduated. Now, I have been back to that school since, because I've taught a couple of times and I've done a couple of other things there. But when you go back into that environment, you suddenly remember, oh yeah, we used to do this.
It smells, it's like the air feels different, isn't it? Like it.
Well, I honestly don't think we forget anything. I think everything is embedded into us, right? And you highlighted something to me years ago, which I still need to look into, but what was the term where, the objects we were talking about haunted houses or something, but the objects around you carry the conversations of the energy.
There's where the stones capture the vibrations of the conversations, and they exist. Because energy is it's always there, right? It stays
always there. It's just transformed, and we just can't read it. And I don't find that particularly peculiar, because, right, you think about a record player where we've embedded sound effectively into that record player. That means something else to pull it out. Same thing might happen with these walls that are hearing us talk. But the point is, nothing is probably lost. Our memories, whatever. It's just that maybe we have a poor filing system, or we don't have need for that right now. So I think that we contain that knowledge all the time. And
I think that's what it's nice to have. I know you can call it junk or hoarding. And clearly there's an element where you can go too much, and I've probably overstepped that with some of my stuff. But sometimes, when you look at items around you, I've got certain things all around me now. I'm covered in what my sister would probably call clutter, right? But recording positive memories, it does lift the mood. When you see an item, it can lift the mood. That's why I've got pictures of my dad around, and of course, I've got a picture of Bruce Springsteen over here, right? Yeah. I don't know Springsteen, I've never met him, but I've seen him in concert several times. And it was a memory of the gig I went to see him in Barcelona. It's good. And some of them are faced with challenges. It can make us more optimistic about what we can achieve. I think I don't know who the author is now, but there's a big movement on social at the minute talking about glimmers. Have you seen that? Everyone's talking about glimmers, and you've got triggers on one side and glimmers on the other. And glimmers are the things where you remember your coffee in the morning, or you see something and it triggers that memory that makes you feel good. And I think these are things where it does matter, but as long as we're within the realms of, not hoarding necessarily, but having things around us that can create glimmers in our lives. That's positive, right? That's a good thing.
Yeah.
And that's a good
it's all about setting up your space, right? And that's why I have my beat model thing on the wall there. I have various vision board things over there on that side, because, like I said before, right, your outside environment is a reflection of your inner and vice versa. And a lot of it comes down to, put yourself in the environment that you want to flourish, right? So the analogy is, if you had an acorn and you just plunked it in a plate and didn't put anything around it, it's not going to flourish, right? But if you put it in good soil, water, it's going to become this oak tree.
Yeah.
And it's the same with humans, is that, and we were talking about it today actually, because I think, part of what we were talking about was old friends, and how, we have different mindsets from maybe people we grew up with. And I think that's why she sort of detached herself a little bit from that. But I was saying how, this is what it was, is that because our kind of frame of reference for how we should be operating in life is, you get the job, you get the 2 kids, you get the kind of house in the suburbs, you do all this. And I said, well, to be fair, there's like 8 billion people on the planet, and probably that's the way for maybe a small fraction. And I said, when I hang out with, you can say, the Mind Valley crew, where basically no one's got a proper 9 to 5. They're entrepreneurs, they're kind of coaches or consultants, they're different. And so when you're around that, you go, oh, well, that's maybe the norm. But if you compare yourself to, so I went out for dinner last week with a friend of mine. This freaked me out a little bit. So we've been friends since probably 6 years old. He was the first friend I made in primary school, and I transferred primary school. I don't see him very often. Only lives about 5-10 minutes away. But last time I saw him was over a year ago. And we went out for dinner, and, we've drifted apart a little bit over the last sort of 20 years. He's so dependable though. And I knew he'd be on time. I was running a bit late. He's always on time. But he's worked for the same company since leaving uni to now. Had one girlfriend for I think maybe 3-4 years, and then about a year later had another girlfriend with a very similar sounding name from the previous one. Married her. He's got 2 kids, boy, girl, been in the same house for like 17 years. He's been working at the same company, and he was talking about how in 7 years' time, when he was 55, because we're both 48 at the moment, like early retirement, if he doesn't draw out that pension until 60, he gets that final salary pension and whatever else. And I was thinking, my God, we're already talking about retirement and pensions. He's lived like the typical 1950s life, right? You live in the same area you grew up, about a mile away from his folks. He's got his 2 kids, probably 2 years apart. I know you have as well. But it's very classic. And then when you compare my life is different because I've meandered, and I was saying that, I haven't had children yet. And, my jobs are here, there and everywhere. It can feel like you're doing the wrong path. And I think that was maybe the point. And I was saying, look, it had to be that way. I've recently got into a guy called Peter Crone. I don't know if you're familiar with him. I think
which was on last episode. I know Peter Crone very well.
So I said something similar to her that he says, and what I say is that it had to happen this way, because if it didn't, if it was due to happen another way, it would have done, right? And so that gives me some solace. It's a bit of a
we have no frame of reference to understand where another direction would have taken us. The idea of the
exactly. And I think we just have to, accept and acknowledge where you are and the path you come. It doesn't mean you have to continue along that same path. But
equally, and I deal with this. I deal with this in my fear coaching, right? So it's never too late to change direction. Never too late to take an opportunity. Exactly. Like failure heals. You taught me. I use this a lot. First attempt in learning, right? But regret lingers. Like regret sticks there. You don't want to be in your deathbed thinking I could have made this choice and I didn't. So if you've still got the power of choice, the power to make a different direction and to change it, then take it, right? What's interesting, I think, when we talk about memories, we're talking about it in a positive way around how nostalgia can make us feel in a positive sense, because you've met your partner and I was talking about my wife, and they're really fun memories. But interesting, a lot of the memories we have that we recall are often around regret, shame, fear, worry, anxiety, and often they're kind of emotions that are anchored in the past. You have PTSD, whereas a lot of the positive ones come in the future. That's why coaching can be so powerful. It's like that's where our calmness comes from, our excitement, because it hasn't happened yet. Like we can still get really excited about what's to come. Memories, I think it's just a fascinating subject all in. I think nostalgia in the way that we framed it today is really positive, but equally thinking about what your friend said, you haven't given her a name, which is fine. When we look back, it can also give us a rosy version of what we had, which can lead to a disappointing view of now. So it's like, then I was fearless, then I was happy all the time, then I did this, and now I'm constrained by X. I don't feel that way anymore. We kind of lose, we believe the stories we tell ourselves, confabulation, where we start to think that we were different then, and we're almost a different person. It's like it can read as a source of unhappiness depending on how we frame it. So for me and you at the moment, as you know, I've got some traumatic memories, as do you. I guess it's about having the opportunity to try and lean on the ones that give us the most joy, the most positivity, the most opportunity to move forward, and try and reject the ones that don't, because they can anchor us in the past too much.
Yeah, I think the key thing is the anchoring bit, because I would say that I have positive and, like everyone, positive and negative memories of the past. My negative memories tend to be constrained to like journals. So for example, whenever I was saying this to my friend today, that I'm sure I've mentioned it either to you or on the podcast before, maybe not, but I've had a journal on and off since I was 10. When I say off, it means mainly off. Like I don't think I've written in it for like 10 years, but there was a lot of entries in those teenage years from about 14 or 15 to probably 19, maybe even after traveling. And they tended to be, I would write in those when I was feeling down, depressed, whatever. So my poorer memories tend to be there. The positive memories tend to be like in those photos or those objects that you've actually decided to keep, right? Because if it was a negative memory, you'd probably get rid of it. So I kind of have them compartmentalized. But I think like in terms of the anchoring, you might call it wallowing, you might call it regret, you might call it, and I know that I way more than that than you are. You're much more of a forward look. This was what makes you a great entrepreneur, because you are a screw it, let's do it, in the words of Richard Branson kind of person that you would, do. We've talked about this many times before. You're already fire aim, I'm ready aim, fire. And so I tend to spend too much time ruminating in the past. And sometimes recently I've been like hesitant about some future conversation, having some challenging conversations with trades people at the moment, but most of that is happening in my head, not with the actual person, right? Like, and trying to, what if this, I mean, I've got a whole list of questions here that I'm going to kind of ask and when I get to see this person, but he's ditching me at the moment.
That links to my fear equation, right? Anxiety plus uncertainty multiplied by imagination.
It's the uncertainty and the imagination. The imagination is probably the bigger lever.
Usually it's highest leverage at the force multiplier. Yeah.
Because, you have this whole thing. And also the other thing is, what was this? So you've got anxiety and
uncertainty multiplied by imagination.
Yeah. So I think the other thing I would say that affects how I'm entering, say, a conversation is the legacy relationship with that person as well. Because, for example, I met another separate tradesperson today because I was just asking around for recommendations on certain people. And I was asking that person similar questions to what I'd be asking the other person. It's like, what could have caused this? And, what's another cause? Or where's the evidence that you have that suggests this? But today, as I was doing it, it was much more from a place of curiosity, inquisitive, friendly. But with the other person, because I've already got the legacy of, I know I've dealt with him a couple of years ago, very challenging, very difficult to talk to, whatever, very defensive person, that I'm already kind of the backup. So I think that's a really important thing of how you approach that conversation. We can't help but come with our baggage, and it's really hard to come with a fresh. So I'm anchored to the past in that.
That's also why your relationship meeting today, why you're able to hit off so easily with the friend that's seen for 30 years, because
yes.
There was no baggage. The last time you remember that meeting was positive, snogging as a 12-year-old or whatever, or meeting at a house as a 19-year-old. They're positive memories, so it makes it very easy to pick up where you left off. It was interesting. You picked up about the ready, fire, aim thing. I am very forward thinking, and I try and live myself in the next version of me to come, iteration, whatever it is, right? I wonder though also, just being reflective in the moment when you were describing the two of us, I don't want to compare because you've been through some as well, but maybe I'm that way because some of my nostalgia, there's a lot of positive memories for sure, right? But a lot of it borders also on grief and trauma. So it's sometimes hard to disconnect one from the other. So it's easier for me to then just disconnect it altogether and focus on the future. And I think one of the goals here, if we're talking about nostalgia memories, probably is not to be mindful, right, of the memories that serve you. If I go to a memory in the past, nostalgic one, I try and visit it on purpose. I want to go to the ones that are going to nourish me. They're going to make me feel good, make me feel positive, and are going to come home to the present. And I do try and deliberately avoid, ignore, disregard those that are more traumatic and are more associated with grief or whatever, because they're more challenging. So I just wonder, I don't know. I was just thinking out loud when you were talking about it. I wonder if that's one of the reasons I try and keep myself rooted in what's to come, because actually going backwards sometimes can be quite painful.
It might be. I mean, I guess the question I would have is, do you remember before? I mean, we have trauma from day one, let's say, but
we do. Was I like that before? You knew me before some of those traumas, so you probably better on top.
And I feel like, from what I understand, let's say from our first meeting, right? We've mentioned it before on the show, the maps, right? The journey,
maps,
right? You're like, let's just go to Paris, guys. Send an email.
That is true.
Work it out as we go, right?
Yes.
So.
Correct.
You were like that before,
That's true. It's true. As I said, it was a thought out loud. You're absolutely right.
And I honestly think you wouldn't have started your business, and you wouldn't have made that leap had you thought about everything.
I'll bow to your wisdom because you know me, and you're absolutely right. And that was Toastmasters talk. People can still find on YouTube where you talk about my maps.
Yeah.
What a good way to round off the show. I know you've got a hard stop in about 5 minutes. So
so tonight actually I'm going to the grand final. So work I do in schools, which I've mentioned on this show many times before, I go in and do a one-day workshop with the students, me, several other trainers. We do it for a charity. And we train around 40,000 students across London and Essex for this competition. And they get whistled down through school competitions, borough competitions, whatever, to 40,000 people to the final 15. And the final 15 is happening tonight. And they do this in a theatre in Covent Garden where they currently show Matilda. It's been like there for the last few years. And so they then present their 3-minute long speech in front of around 1,000 people. And actually tonight, my mum's coming along, who I said, you probably won't be interested in this. But she was like, oh, no, I will. Because I think she wants to get out of the house. So we're going to head down to Covent Garden. It starts at 7 o'clock, watch 15 speakers, hopefully, I don't know any of the finalists are ones I trained. They may be because I did quite a few workshops, but I don't think they are.
Well, enjoy.
Which is a shame because it's always nice. I think 4 years ago, one of the winner from the whole thing was one of my students. So that's always quite nice.
I think you shared the story on an episode before we go back on what it is now. Yeah.
So we'll see. So that's the combination of that work. So I'm going to be doing that. And then final day of go into a school tomorrow, actually. It's my final one of the year where I'm going to be going into a school and doing this workshop. Obviously, the people tomorrow are not going to be eligible for the competition. But, like I tell them in the workshop, the competition is irrelevant in my view. The real winning is about being in the space, because I give them the stat that those people that have got good communication skills tend to earn on average. And I can't remember where I got the stat from. I say all these stats all the time. I don't remember where I got them from, but they earn around 70% more income than their peers doing the same job as them. And often I use you actually as an example, another friend of mine. And I say, because you're good at communicating, because you put yourself out there with the podcast, which I say is a reason to communicate, because a lot of people say, oh, I don't want to speak in front of people.
Sure.
Like, what if you don't want to do a podcast? I say, because of that, your business and you as an individual are very successful, right? You're the kind of person that is going to be invited to do the keynotes, going to be invited to do the panels, going to be, if I went to a payroll seminar in Austin, you'd probably be like a little local hero there or something, like, and everyone would know who you were. And I have another friend who's similar in the health and safety space. And if you were just a regular payroll person, had a regular recruitment company and you couldn't communicate, you wouldn't be nearly as successful. So that's why I say there is that 70%, more income.
I agree. You also got to put yourself out there. That's the fear. Don't let the fear decide for you, right? Just, you got something that you want to do and you got fear telling you now's not the right time, I need more credentials first or whatever. You just got to go for it, right? It's a signal of something that matters. So
I was thinking about you the other day as well, where last 2 weekends, I can't remember who spoke since I went, but I went to a couple of different health events. And honestly, neither were that good. One I spent way too much money on. The other one I managed to get a massive discount for. But I was thinking, look, I need to go to more of these things because you're successful, but not because of luck, right? Because you might go to hundreds of events, you do hundreds of interviews. You are prolific on LinkedIn, writing those blogs and do it all the time. You're putting yourself out there. And you have to do that so that you get to hear. You can't just go to like 1 or 2 events and expect to land that client. And so I was thinking to myself, look, I need to get out there more. I need to do more things. And yes, 99% of them are not going to be useful or whatever. But I think that you're really good at that. You're so good at kind of just going out there, doing.
Thank you in the way that you asked me to we discussed we should receive it earlier. So thank you. I appreciate that. I really do.
I learned a lot from you.
I don't believe in luck. I believe in being prepared for opportunities. You got to put yourself out there for the luck to find you, right? And I've been fortunate in many ways with the work that we do, and I enjoy this show very much as well. Who knows where this will lead in the future? We don't know, but it's reaching people. We get feedback. It's a good way, if nothing else, mate, it's a great chance for you and I to connect on a weekly basis. I enjoy that. It's great.
Yeah, I do too. So thank you, and shifting your schedule to mine today, actually, which is
all right, man. I don't think I was too late today either, which is good. About 5 minutes. That's an improvement for me. Go and enjoy your talks. Well done. I hope they go really, really well. Enjoy your day. And next catch up, we'll see if we can catch up on what we were supposed to talk about today. I won't give it away in case something else comes up, but
yeah, sure.
Subject still to address. So I look forward to catching up with you next time, buddy.
I'll have more data on it as well by then, which will be quite interesting. All right,
good man.
Buddy, take care. And thank you, everyone, for listening.
Cheers, mate.
Bye-bye.